Well, welcome everyone. This is Kristen Ferguson, Chair of the Planning Board. I'm going to call this meeting of April 13th, 2021 to order at 7:02. And we are recording this meeting. This is a virtual meeting and we invite public comment towards the end, or if we have any other things, we'll invite some public comment where you will raise your hand and we will promote you to be unmuted so we can hear your comment after you state your name and address. So the first thing let's do is roll call. Mr. Saya.
Here.
Ms. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Bosdet.
Here.
And this is Kristen Ferguson. I'm here, but it looks like we're missing Burton Flint and Kate McEnany and Haley Orvidal. Do we need a quorum for anything tonight?
4 is a quorum.
4, okay, so we're all set. Thank you. All right, well, on our agenda tonight, we have Chris, thank you very much for joining us from MAPC to talk about the Thoreau Depot redevelopment project, in particular zoning and parking requirements. So Chris, thanks for kind of doing some research and coming back to us. We know we put you off a little bit. After that, we'll take some public comment after that before we get to our administrative business. We've got one A&R. We've got an information to consider about a recommendation to the select board. And then we need to talk about which articles each of us are presenting at town meeting. So with that, Chris, are you sharing your screen or is Elizabeth sharing hers for you?
It says I'm disabled, but I can share it if I'm made a co-host, unless Elizabeth, if you want to. Either way is fine.
No,
Chris, I just enabled you to share.
All right. So hi, everybody. So I think, yeah, there were a few things that we were thinking of discussing tonight. One had to do with the housing choice legislation. That was actually one of the reasons we haven't met for so long, was trying to get some clarity on this. So I don't know, Elizabeth, how much you've spoken with the planning board about this. So I don't need to belabor it if you feel like it's kind of already covered, or we can, I think there's still some things that are not clear, but we can kind of talk about what we do know and some thoughts on that. And then we have been working, I think every time we've kind of discussed this issue of the combined business residence provisions. So we want to continue talking about that. And then again, talking about a little bit about the parking requirements that would be for this district. And then, we've kind of met a number of times. We're sort of kind of at the tail end of the project now. And so I think it's kind of to the point where I'm looking for, any specific feedback from the planning board to kind of incorporate into the zoning or the design guidelines. So I'll take any of those comments. This graphic here just kind of reminds us of sort of an overview of what the process has been and sort of where we are in that process. And actually, I guess I have this line a little bit off. It's supposed to be obviously May right now. I have it. Oh, actually it is April. Sorry. I had it originally in March. But so this is intended to be our last planning board meeting. We had then discussed after this, taking all of the comments and then either coming back for one more sort of more public facing forum to present everything sort of as a package, and then taking comments, doing a final sort of revisions ahead of a public hearing. And we've been talking about having this go for the fall town meeting, obviously not for this spring. So I guess I'll proceed with some of the thoughts on the housing choice, and then again, feel free to just cut me off. I have some much wordier slides than I normally have in my presentations, but I felt like this way, you'll be able to sort of chew this over afterwards. So a couple of the points as it relates to the Thoreau Depot zoning. One thing, as you probably know at this point, that the housing choice legislation allows for a simple majority rather than a 2/3 supermajority for some types of zoning, specifically zoning that includes multifamily and mixed-use development in an eligible location. we know that the area around Thorough Depot is clearly an eligible location because it specifically calls out areas around transit. So I think it does meet that threshold. The planning board or another town official is also welcome to send a sort of an official request to EOHED for an advisory opinion on that question. The other part of the housing choice legislation has to do with the actual requirements. So as you at this point probably know, every MBTA community, which Concord is one, must have at least one zoning district of a reasonable size, which has not been defined what is a reasonable size at this point, in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. And it also has to allow for at least 15 units per acre by right is one of the other criteria. So, whereas I think before we've kind of been doing this zoning and maybe it was sort of like almost like a nice to have type of thing, I think now there's sort of much more of an imperative for really all communities that don't have this to have it. So I think Concord's in a good position because we've been obviously working on zoning, and so we have that. So you're ahead of some places, and whereas of course other places already do have the zoning. So I think you're sort of right in that middle ground. But I think it's still a pretty good place to be. And for not complying with this, there's a number of sort of sticks. So you would not be eligible to apply for MassWorks grants, as well as other grants from Housing Choice. And I forget what some of the others on that list are.
And Chris, before you go on, I have a quick question, and Chris and Elizabeth. So we are planning to, this town meeting, we're moving an article about two-family housing. It's not by right, it's by special permit right now. And it is in our resident C. But right now, all right, so keep that aside, but right now, do we have no zoning districts in which multi-housing family is permitted by right? Is that correct? We do not meet the requirement, right?
Correct. We don't.
And okay, and even if the two-family passed, that wouldn't meet the requirement because it's by special permit, not by right. And I see they say multi-family housing where you have the certain density. Two-family housing wouldn't necessarily meet that requirement. Is that correct?
Yeah, projecting.
Multifamily is defined, they have a new definition, is defined as 3 or more units, so it wouldn't. The other point is for an MBTA community, I believe it has to be within a half mile of the station.
Great, okay. So thank you.
Sure.
Please continue.
So this, the other kind of big question that has been out there, and again, that's why I know this is a very wordy slide, so I won't read it all, but the question that's been in my mind the most that has still not been fully clarified is, it says it has to require multifamily. Does mixed use satisfy the requirement? Because I know many communities, not only Concord, but we were also dealing with this up in Situate and in Ashland, where I'm doing work. I think very reasonably, many of these communities want to kind of keep the commercial core sort of commercial and are okay with allowing residential, but want it to be part of a mixed use development. And so it's not 100% clear whether mixed use development satisfies that as opposed to allowing multifamily by right. I think clearly there is a concern that if you allow multifamily by right, that could displace existing commercial activity, just because we know from a market demand perspective, it's that's where there's a lot more demand generally. That being said, from everyone I have spoken to so far, and just from kind of using some logic, we think that mixed use will satisfy that as long as mixed use is sort of structured appropriately. So there's new definition now in Chapter 48, the state legislation, of what multifamily is. And as I just noted, it's a building of 3 or more residential units. There's also a new definition of mixed use, which is, I think, pretty kind of clear about it being development that contains both residential and non-residential uses. And so it seems to me and us and everyone that I've spoken to at MAPC that as long as mixed use sort of meets the definition requirement, meaning as long as mixed use means a building with 3 or more units, it is a type of multifamily building. So it's also consistent with what they do for Chapter 40R, and I know a lot of this legislation has been based upon the provisions of Chapter 40R, which allows for mixed-use zoning. So my recommendation is that we would proceed that way. I would certainly hope before the fall town meeting that this will be 100% clarified, but I think it's a reasonable way for us to kind of work towards, because again, I know that's from my conversations with the planning board and others in the town, that sort of seems to be kind of an important provision of ensuring that there is still the commercial components.
And Chris, what's the timeline for towns to comply?
So it is the law of the land now. My understanding is that there's about going to be about a year grace period before there's issues related to like the sticks component, meaning like loss of grants. I don't know if that's a hard and fast date though. That's sort of just what I heard. I forget when, a little bit when this first came out. So maybe I'll just pause there. Are there any other questions before we kind of then move into the next item on the agenda? Okay, I see shaking heads. Obviously, we can come back to this. So we've also been having some conversations about the combined business residence. And again, as a reminder, there are provisions that exist today that we feel need to be altered, at least for the Concord Thoreau Depot area, in order to make this, which is your mixed use sort of use, actually work as I think would be intended in an area like this. One of them, I think everyone sort of agreed with, that right now all buildings have to be mixed use, meaning the same building, but they're allowing for some additional flexibility by allowing certain buildings to be of single use would make sense, especially in larger lots. And really the key is that you want the commercial and retail parts to be along the street. That's kind of what's most important for that active, creating that active, vibrant kind of downtown-ish feeling. We've also talked about the open space. And again, it's right now it requires twice the gross floor area of whatever is residential. And I think that would be unworkable in a lot of these parcels, which are quite small. It's also not, frankly, it's not a typical sort of mechanism for determining what is open space. And so we're recommending something just sort of a bit cleaner. That would be, again, 15% of the lot area when there's residential. I think that could even come down more, but I think that's sort of at least a reasonable figure to start at. The other question then has to do with the number of affordable units. So today it kicks in when there are 4 or more units in a project, and then 20% have to be affordable. And as I think I've reiterated every time, we strongly at MAPC support inclusionary zoning, but we think that at this level, it's likely going to be unworkable and could be hindering development in this area where we want to see revitalization. So, from, again, conversations with my colleagues in our housing department, we thought that a more reasonable figure would be to be 15% of units being affordable rather than 20%, and for that to kick in at a higher threshold. I'm proposing 8, starting at 8 units, but again, that, it ends up being sort of what the board is comfortable with. I think we talked about some other concepts about having sort of like a sliding scale that could occur. I think the challenge is to do that requires a high level of analysis that really we certainly don't have the budget for, but also I'm not really sure it's worth it in what is really a small area. I think that's the type of inclusionary zoning that you would want to apply townwide. One of the things that had come up, or one of the requests from one of the planning board members last time then, was to just do a few kind of simple build outs just to see what the affordable units would come out to under these scenarios. Yeah, and so that's what I've done. So I've started with, if you recall, this kind of example that was done for a hypothetical redevelopment of the parcel where Crosby's Marketplace is. Of course, this again is not real, but this was kind of showing one way that the future vision could play out. This had a number of buildings, and this kind of tested the heights and the density along with the required parking. And so this type of development, which is your largest site within the district, kind of is at the one extreme. And here we came up with 63 units. Again, this isn't the only sort of way that you could build this area. You could build it might be fewer, it might be more, but again, you have to contend with the parking that would be required. So I think this is pretty reasonable. And so the request was how much affordability would be required at sort of different levels. So within the 63 units, of course, any threshold would actually, this would kick in. And so you can see if you did 10% of, you'd have 6 units. If you did 15%, you'd get 9 units. And if you had a 20% affordability, which is what it is today, you would get 13 units. So this shows the numbers, but it doesn't show whether it's actually would pencil out. But again, that's what, that I think would be sort of outside the scope to try to figure out that aspect of it. But we did that for a couple other properties as well, again, just to get a sense. And this is more of a back of the envelope type of calculation for redevelopment. We looked at this site at 109 Thoreau Street, which is about 1.4 acres. It sort of works out to the building footprint being pretty similar when you kind of keep when you incorporate the parking requirements. So that, as part of a redevelopment, would essentially stay constant, and you would end up getting about 24 residential units. And so again, at the 15%, you would end up with 4 affordable units. And again, at 24 units, this would kick in regardless of what threshold you are at. So I did this for exercise for one other parcel, for a much smaller parcel now. And here, this site at 71 Thoreau Street, it's only 1/4 of an acre. So this is obviously much smaller. You end up getting 5 units. And again, this was a back of the envelope calculation, so it's not exact. Here, if we had the threshold at 8 or even 6, you wouldn't have any affordable units. So I think you'd have to make a little bit of a judgment on whether that's appropriate for what is a fairly small project. Making sure it pencils out. If the threshold was 5, and the affordability was 15%, you would end up with a single unit. And actually, and even under today's requirements, you would end up with a single affordable unit if this were to be redeveloped. So I guess I'll pause here again, because this has kind of come up several times. I think, again, in the end, it's sort of, what does the board feel comfortable with? We don't need to make any changes from what's there today, but again, just from speaking to my colleagues who kind of do this part for a living, as well as just the fact that, as far as I know, no developments have come in under your affordable housing requirement. It suggests that it's a little too, I guess, strict. And so I suggest loosening that, at least for Thoreau, and it's kind of the opportunity to see what happens. Does it unlock development? Are you not getting any affordability? In which case you might want to dial it, change it, but it's, I think, sort of a path forward.
Thanks, Chris. I think these are very helpful, just thinking about what could be. And a quick question for Elizabeth, if and I've asked this before, and I apologize that I've forgotten, at Crosby's, or even at what we're looking at now, I'm just trying to think about how many business owners, or how many property owners there are. Thinking about, so here, what you're showing me, I imagine that's one property owner that's going to make a decision to redevelop this property and have the mixed use, and then deal with the affordable. Over at Crosby's, where you have the 63 units, is that more than one property owner that might be tackling that? Or
that was a single. It's 2 parcels, but a single property owner.
Okay.
And that's actually why, when we had sort of modeled it, you can see the kind of beigeish buildings that exist. My understanding is that's a separate property owner, even
Okay.
though it kind of, the Crosby property kind of wraps around it.
Got it. Okay. So I was just thinking about what, one, how to redevelop in, like consistently if we have multiple property owners, and two, if it's, a 63 unit site plus or minus, and that person is managing all the affordable housing as well versus, got more than one property owners, one property owner might be dealing with fewer affordable or more. I don't think it's necessarily relevant. I was just curious. Let me hear from the board. Linda, Nathan, Alan, what questions do you have while we've got Chris on the line? Should we be considering?
So, Kristen, I think this is just kind of wrapping up. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, just the last few times that talked about the combined business residence and just coming to a final consensus as far as the affordability requirement. And so I think it's helpful to have the two examples that you provided, Chris. And if you can go back 2 slides to your chart. Yeah. So, so far as the combined business residence, the board has talked about these proposed solutions, and I think there's been consensus as far as the mixed use, as far as not requiring commercial and residential, allowing separate buildings and that type of thing. I think there was also consensus as far as the open space that really has been a significant hindrance as far as combined business in the and mixed use development in the village centers, because there's not a lot of open space to begin with. So I think it's coming to a final consensus on the affordability requirement, and getting that consensus so that we can move forward and actually start to begin drafting zoning, have Chris draft the zoning. So I think that's one aspect before he moves on to parking.
Linda?
One question. Can you remind me what we're using in this context in terms of the definition of affordability, in terms of what % of median area income? I guess that's that we're predicating these assumptions on.
I believe it would be 80% AMI. That's pretty standard. Elizabeth can correct me if you have a different way of doing it in Concord.
No, so for mixed use development, it would be at the 80% area median income. So all the units would go towards our subsidized housing inventory.
Okay, thank you.
So we've got an updated recommendation for the projects of 8 units or more, that 15% of the units are affordable. And we could consider reducing that requirement for smaller projects to make that more attractive and still, get some affordable housing. Alan, Linda, or Nathan, do you have any suggested changes to that recommendation? Or is that something that you'd like to see Chris put in our draft zoning?
I don't have any changes to it. I just want to confirm, because Chris, I know you mentioned working with some other towns about issues similar to this, but does this align with what you see in other towns, what you recommend to other towns? Are you specifically saying for the Thoreau district and Concord, this makes the most sense?
This is more based on general precedents. Again, we haven't done a specific analysis. Again, my colleagues, we've done actual really, nuanced analyses, but those, again, tend to be for an entire community rather than a single neighborhood or district. And frankly, they're also quite expensive. You know, that's like a $40,000 type of project. So absent that a lot of places don't have the ability to kind of do that type of analysis, we sort of just look for what I would call sort of a best practice. And I'd say I'm probably, in this case, I've been erring on the side of being sort of most flexible. So, you know, again, it would be reasonable to have the threshold be, I think, 6 units. I've seen that certainly, that would not be uncommon to have it. So you could do that. I think I was sort of erring on the side of, you know, kickstarting redevelopment and revitalization in this area. And that was what I was hoping to accomplish by that.
So Chris, can I ask you, Concord is passed our bylaws to have an affordable housing trust. Have you seen communities where, let's say, we retain the 15% for 8 units or more, and then for, you know, 7 units or less, not necessarily requiring the development of an affordable unit in the project, but maybe just some, you know, monetary contribution to an affordable housing trust?
I have, and I spoke about this with my colleague who's in the housing department, and I guess what she was cautioning was that she felt that getting that number right, what is the amount that would go, you know, for that payment in lieu is not something to sort of enter lightly, and that's a sort of a very important number for how much, and determining that takes a lot of analysis. So again, I'm sure we could find something, or it could be a negotiated agreement. We could have it as, you know, loose as that type of thing, and with a planning board decision, that would make it a bit discretionary. But there are ways if you wanted to for smaller projects. Again, I'm not sure what the exact number would be though.
So I just wanted the board to kind of hear that, because that is something that's going to be brought up. And the challenge is that again, each project's different, each developer's different, each, site's different, financing's different. All of those go into the creation of, a mixed use project. And that in lieu payment process to, try and figure that out becomes very challenging because of all those factors. So I would probably recommend, and again, it also comes back to, what's the ability of staff, to be able to assist these people in coming up with that number. And we do have the Regional Housing Services, office, but again, as Chris said, a lot of analysis goes into what is that appropriate in lieu fee. So I would probably, recommend that not trying to develop that as part of a zoning bylaw, because there's all these different factors. So thinking about maybe, 15% of the units are affordable for 6 or more, units. And, understanding that, yes, you're not going to capture, all these little small projects, but, as Chris said, you're kind of, balancing, the ability to get affordable units, but right now we're not getting any. So having a zoning bylaw that does provide some incentive for what it is we want to do in these village centers.
Elizabeth, you said 6 or more units instead of 8 or more units. Why 6?
So the conversation in the community will come up that, 15% for 8 or more units, then for 7 or less, we should get them to
Okay.
some type of in lieu fee. And that type of analysis for an
Okay.
in lieu fee is
I see.
incredibly
So
challenging. So
you think the town will say we're missing opportunities for affordable housing, and so and want to capture the
that
payment
would be,
instead.
that would be a suggestion to try and balance those two.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, Alan, Nathan, Linda, any thoughts on the threshold, 6 or 8 units? And then we'll talk about the percentage.
I just would throw in one other thing for the food for thought, I guess, as for this was that I was at town meeting last night for Situate. I was there for zoning, but they also had a warrant article on inclusionary zoning, both of which passed, and their inclusionary zoning was 15% at 6 units. So that, you know, as a benchmark of a recent adoption is something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my initial reaction would be to go to 6 units. If we're currently at 4 rather than going to 8, and then address again further down the line if, you know, if that's not, we're not seeing anything still.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Linda or Alan?
I agree with Nathan's assessment, basically. Going with 6.
Oh, Linda, you're muted.
Seems reasonable to me as well.
See, I would have gone with the 8 units, thinking that we want to encourage as much development as we can in this area, particularly because I don't know how much the property owners are talking about leaping right on board here. And I mean, there's going to be major investments in the redevelopment, although I think there would be certainly major rewards for them afterwards as well. When do we need to make this recommendation by? I think we're trying to give you something to go back and work on now, correct?
Yeah.
Because I think it would be helpful to have the input from 3 other planning board members. We can also hear from some public comment as well. Let you go on if that's okay, and then we'll give you something to work with before you leave today.
Okay, and I mean, it's not, again, it won't be set in stone. We can always change it again, but it'd be nice to,
Right, nail that down.
Yeah. So then the final thing just to talk about was the parking requirements. So I think as an overall principle, parking requirements for walkable mixed use areas, as well as or including areas that are near transit, should generally be different from other parts of town. And so kind of what I was recommending for the parking requirements for Thoreau was, you have your existing parking requirements, which is whatever the certain ratios per use. Then for non-residential uses, you would just off the bat sort of reduce it. So it would be less essentially due to a smart growth location. And that includes the fact that you have people who can walk to these different businesses. You have on-street parking. So you have sort of the ability that it's sort of different from like if you're in some, I guess, like strip mall type of area. We would then recommend that there are other opportunities to reduce the parking that's required. And generally this is done through approval by the planning board. So there's sort of 3 different kind of options, and I would kind of recommend including all of them. One is allowing a reduction essentially for shared parking. So when you have a mixed use development, the concept is that not every sort of required parking space would be needed at the same time. So if you have a mixed use development and you have an office, let's say, and residences, typically at least most of the office parking spaces are occupied during the day, whereas at least some large portion of the residential parking spaces are probably out because people are driving during the day, and the vice versa at night. So you sort of allow for, rather than having sort of the accumulative of how many spaces, there's some sort of overlap and it's allowed to be sort of reduced. There's also generally, we see as best practice sort of a reduction for sort of a specific use if essentially if it's kind of the onus is on the developer. And keeping in mind that developers have sort of a market incentive to get the parking right. They don't want to underpark their area. They don't want to overpark it either because there's a high cost to that. And so again, if the onus is on the developer to sort of demonstrate that they should be allowed to be reduced for one or more of their uses on their site. And then the third is we often see a reduction of what is required due to what we call transportation demand management elements. So this could be if you provide a zip car or other sort of car sharing service, then you might have the opportunity to, eliminate a couple of your required parking spaces type of thing. Could be for if it's an office or commercial property for providing like transit passes, or for residents, provide them with transit passes. These are sort of the types of things where often allow sort of a modest reduction of what is required in parking. So that's kind of the structure that I would recommend. There is alternatives. You could provide just completely separate ratios for this certain area. I think that would be a reasonable approach. I think the way that I've sort of laid it out here, what's nice is it sort of takes what Concord already has and presumably feels comfortable with, and allows sort of that opportunity for a reduction. But again, the onus generally is going to be then on the developer to sort of prove to you that that's warranted, so that you don't that you have the sufficient amount of parking that you need. So I'll stop there. And again, I think that's sort of the last slide that I have.
Thank you. The big picture of parking has been on the mind of the planning board for some time, and we know that we need to address it in village centers. And so I want to think about how, and I think we want to be careful about starting with our baseline and just adjusting it rather than thinking about best practices going forward.
Okay.
That's just my view based on kind of what we've talked about. Because I want to be careful that we don't keep, just tweaking what we have, but it still doesn't meet the bigger picture. So your optional steps and kind of how you've been thinking about shared parking is, I think that's what we had been thinking about, but we just haven't been able to give it that bigger picture view. And I guess I would be curious about if we just went full scale and said, okay, let's try this. I mean, so we do have the problem where people that come in front of us are always saying there's not enough parking, there's not enough parking. So we know we have to kind of address those concerns hopefully with some data. And so I think that's what would be helpful about, well, the whole point of this, mixed use and this walkability is that, people aren't bringing their cars here, we're by the transit. Is there other data that we can point to? Are there other reports that we should be referring to as we're preparing to educate the public?
Well, so MEPC did a pretty extensive research, and it's called the Perfect Fit Parking. It focuses though on only the residential side of parking. And what they did was they did surveys of parking at developments around transit throughout the region. I forget exactly how many, but there was a number of characteristics. And so there were, some of them were more suburban locations that would be, I think, more similar to Concord's situation. There were also a number of very sort of inner core types of things. So I think that website, if finding the right comparables, I think would probably be helpful. The big take, there were some kind of common themes about it. And one is that generally speaking, residences have been overparked around transit because, again, there are a lot of people, not everybody certainly, but there will be a number of people who are attracted to living in this area specifically because they can take the commuter rail to work every day. And don't need a car, or if they're a couple, they maybe just have one car rather than 2 cars, as a more typical suburban couple would be. The other sort of takeaway that they did, and this is almost like the opposite in some ways, but they however the regression analysis sort of determined this, was that one of the biggest factors in terms of how much sort of people are parking is how much is actually supplied. So that if you reduce the supply, the units will still be occupied, but you won't have as many cars. So I think both of those kind of together tell the story that generally speaking, we're over parking around transit.
And then the other question I have, which is completely different, is, oh, so that's good to know, because that I think is what we had anecdotally thought, and yet, you know, public comment would be the opposite reaction of that, and I think that's just a function of, you know, perception and comfort level. At Crosby's parking lot, there is a section that's reserved for the town, or for parking for the train. Who owns that? And I would imagine that we will not have room for that much parking if we were to develop more of that area.
I'll let Elizabeth answer who.
Yeah.
owns the
So I think there's about like 52 spaces, and that parking is owned by Crosby's, but the town has an agreement with them, and the town issues parking passes
Mhm.
for people to park there. So
And I don't know that it's super relevant, just thinking about if we would still have room to do something like that, if that would be a loss, or you know, what we would want to do about that.
I think that would definitely have to be part of that conversation. But you know, the goal is to create these mixed use developments, you know, in the village by the train station. And what I'd probably see happening is, you know, as this moves, you know, hopefully this moves forward, that at the same time, you know, the town is able to, you know, get back to getting the funding to implement the shuttle, which would help, you know, if those spaces had to go away, those people that are currently Concord residents that are, you know, driving to park there to take the train, you know, maybe that would capture a portion of the people that are driving there, you know, if there was the shuttle.
Okay.
I would just say, you know, again, if ultimately it's the town's decision to, you know, keep the agreement in place of the 50 odd parking spaces, then it would just affect, you know, it might affect how much build out there is. So rather than being, like I said, 63 units, maybe you end up with 45 or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out there. Or maybe a developer has the ability to create some structured parking. I was being sort of conservative and always assuming surface level parking, but obviously structured parking, it's vastly more expensive, about $30,000 per parking space, but it's also a much more efficient sort of use of the space, of course.
Structured parking being like a parking garage?
The garage, yeah.
Right. And do we have zoning restrictions against that? Or would that have to be included in what we write?
There's
Well,
no restrictions to structured parking.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so my take was, I think that we should try to kind of lead by parking example here, kind of making changes here, and then hopefully that would help us to transition to the village centers when we make upgrades to that. However, Alan and Linda and Nathan, let me hear your thoughts on that.
The only question I had related to the sort of interrelation between steps 2 and 3, but Chris, you addressed that earlier on, so I don't have any other questions on this one right now.
I guess I have one question, which is the issue of family housing. And is there, I don't know if there's a relationship between, you know, having this developed as a housing of studios and 1 bedrooms versus 2 and 3 bedroom, and is the parking part of that equation? And how do we make sure that we don't end up with 63 studio apartments and nothing for families?
That's a good point. Which is also kind of frankly nice to hear, because often I hear the opposite, where people are saying we only want studios and 1 bedrooms because we want to keep those families out. So it's nice that you don't have that perspective. And on that kind, because I have seen communities who have tried to actually say we are going to put a limit on bedrooms, so you can only have 1 and 2 bedrooms. And MAPC's position is that actually would run afoul of federal fair housing laws, because it by nature discriminates against families. I think, although I don't know, and I'd probably want to test this with my colleagues, I think it would be reasonable, or at least legal, to say there is a minimum percent of 3 bedrooms. Generally, for example, for a 40R district, they or any other sort of types of zoning, or 40B, I believe as well, they require 10%, at least 10% of units to have 3 or more bedrooms. So I think that it would be something that we could do. We might only want to do that though for units for developments of a certain size, because for very small units, I'm not sure you would want a 3-bedroom necessarily. If you only had like 3 or 4 units, it might just be tough to get that in. So again, that's something we can think about, or we can do if that's what the board would like.
But that doesn't influence how you would design the numbers for parking.
It might actually, and it depends. Sometimes these go by parking spaces per unit, like let's say 1.5 spaces per unit. I also see it done on a per bedroom basis. So it might be 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom, for example, and 1 space for a 1-bedroom. At a 3-bedroom, you're kind of at that border where you don't necessarily need more parking, because often that might be a kid or something. So you could just say for 2 or more bedrooms, 2 spaces per unit.
Thank you.
And that's a good question, Linda. Are we making this more complicated than it needs to be? I'm just thinking about, you're proposing we could do that. I just want to make sure we're kind of leaving it broad enough that we aren't making special cases for everything. Are we giving you too many constraints, I guess is my question.
I mean, no, I mean, I've had many boards who give a lot more very specific questions. So what I've been seeing as sort of a kind of simplified way is just saying 1.5 spaces per unit, and that's sort of simplified. If we want to also have that bedroom kind of percentage in there, I think it is a good thing, because otherwise I think you are going to get mostly 1 and 2 bedrooms. That's probably where the market more is. And I think to at least have some small number of 3 bedrooms, I think is a good thing. So I don't think that would be an unreasonable thing to add.
Chris, have you seen projects where they also have a percentage of studio apartment requirements?
Not off the top of my head. Go ahead, sorry.
I think you kind of get the real the financial spread. So it's not just families, and a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom is, whether it's rental or ownership, it's going to be more than a studio is going to be significantly less. And while it's still probably going to, as far as a rental or a home ownership in Concord, is still going to be fairly high, but at least it might be something where the 4-year-old 25-year-olds moving back to Concord and at least can afford a studio apartment for a while. Have you ever seen that as a requirement?
I haven't off the top of my head. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I could certainly look into it. I understand your logic. I guess just overall though, I would be kind of a little, I would just be hesitant or at least caution about being too prescriptive in terms of what's allowed, because again, every sort of provision we add in as a requirement, reduces that flexibility that a developer has to make a project pencil out. So I guess going back to the earlier question, are we making it more complicated than it needs to be? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a good thing for us to kind of keep in our minds. But I will check into the question about the percentages as it relates to a studio.
Well, or just an alternative, having a percentage of, requirement for three or more bedrooms, and then, have the requirement, the remainder of units need to be a mixture of studio 1 and 2 bedrooms. So, and then you leave it up to the developer to develop a project that, sprinkles a couple of studios and 1 bedrooms and then 2 bedrooms in there.
I think that it's still, in my mind, I would recommend that still kicks in for projects of a certain size. Maybe it's tied to the same if there's affordable housing units or something. But I'm just thinking, if you had like a 4-unit project, I feel like the margins are going to be so thin that for something like that, we would just probably want a developer to be able to sort of just do what he or she needs to do in order to make a profit. Is my sense.
Okay.
But again, I defer to the town because I'm your consultant. So whatever you think is best.
So I think that's a good threshold for as far as the projects. I think 6 is too low. I think once you get above 8 or 10, having that mixture.
Yeah.
And play into the financial aspects of it, but
that makes sense. Okay.
So how would you tackle the parking then? How would you kind of go back and make some changes?
So it sounds like, rather than just starting with the town's existing parking, which might just be, off, we might as well start with what is sort of best practice. I will say, even what I tend to see is, and I'm probably going to rely on Situate, because I think, for one thing, it's quite new zoning, and I think there's a lot of similarities to Concord, and they have a number of villages, and this zoning applies for their various villages. They have an alternative set of parking that they sort of start with a base that's different from other parts of town, but then they still have various sort of mechanisms to reduce it further through approval. So I think that's sort of what I guess the main change then would be, step 1 would be not beginning with the town's existing parking, but it would be starting with what is the best practice, and then I would eliminate step 2, because step 2 is kind of a roundabout way to try and get at that.
Nathan, Linda, and Alan, what would you think of that? I mean, I know that we've all heard concerns about parking from the public, but we've also talked about ways to really bring our parking requirements more current and certainly in line with the long range plan for sustainability and reduced I guess single vehicle transportation. Would you have any concerns if we sent Chris back to the drawing board to kind of revamp this a little bit and make it more in line with best practices?
No, I'd have no problems with that. I mean, I think, as you said, we've talked about this, and I'm definitely for, making this more, the town centers and the transportation hubs definitely more people focused than parking focused as a starting point. So yeah, anything we can do to bring that up to date and sort of make, people and walkability and access that way the focus, I'm all for it.
Thanks. Alan, Linda, any thoughts?
One thought I had is in that step 5 of reduction of required parking, perhaps we could consider charging stations as well in this process. I don't, if there's either incentives for that or for solar panels on parking areas or whatever other things people find interesting that they're cooking up that you've seen?
Yep, that's a good idea. I can
Is it-
definitely
It
do that.
is a good idea. Is that something that would go into zoning, or is that something that's coming from CMLP, our municipal light plant? Chris, do you like, does
Well,
that,
I believe I have seen as part of a TDM sort of suite of options, charging stations can be sort of one of those options. So I think that makes sense.
And when you, and what you've seen as far as adding charging stations to be one of the sort of things that reduces the requirement, has it been that the owner of the property is then full funding the amount of charging, or are they bringing in, a Charge America or some other contract company for the charging purposes and working with them? I'm just curious because obviously, incentive wise to them, it's going to be to contract with somebody else, not for them to take on the cost of actually charging.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer, and I actually don't know if, again, if this is sort of the suite of TDM options, I don't know if they've actually done it. I'm not, I assume that there are examples, but I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Okay.
certainly a good suggestion. I'm going to open it up for public comment, but let me make sure that the board asks any other questions. These are all really good points and suggestions. And Chris, if you wouldn't mind keeping your slides up in case somebody wants you to go back. So I believe if you have a comment, you're going to use your raise hand function, and then we're going to unmute you, call you to unmute, and then please state your name and address for the record, and then your comment. So hold on, let me see. Okay, so Pamela Dritt, I think you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Road. I really appreciated your mentioning of charging stations. Is it possible in this to also encourage all electric buildings and solar panel covered parking and roofs?
It's certainly possible. This is something that I think we've been discussing at least since the last time. I guess my recommendation is that, if that's done, that should be done on a municipal level so that it applies for everything and doesn't sort of just single out one neighborhood, because, I think we have to be, honest that as great as that is, that there is a cost associated with it. And,
Is
if
there though?
my understanding
I don't
is there
think
is.
so.
Um,
I thought it tended to reduce actually the cost
It
of
might
the
reduce the-
infrastructure of the building.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer because I've heard both sides, and I know from the industry that they've sort of been, they feel like it will add to their construction costs, which will then be passed on to the consumer. I don't know if that's true or not, but again,
Yeah.
my feeling is whether it is or isn't, if it's going to be done, it should be applying townwide as opposed to only one single neighborhood, one very small neighborhood, because I think this is a neighborhood where kind of our principle has been, let's spark revitalization. And again, I will do, again, whatever the town wishes me to do, but my recommendation would be that we don't sort of make it more onerous here than in other parts of town, like keep it on a level playing field.
I think we're trying to go for townwide, aren't we?
What Chris is here to talk about is specifically he's helping develop zoning just for this one area, because we would need to change it just in this area. Hopefully, town-wide, we are trying to do things that line up with a long-range plan and sustainability, but we still have to do that within the constraints of the state requirements for what bylaws can and cannot include. That's kind of been our issue in the past in terms of non-fossil fuel for new construction and things like that. I guess to your point, Ms. Dritt, it seems like the cost of building energy efficient, good building envelopes and efficient, heating and cooling should be cost comparable or more cost friendly. But I mean, it depends on, our developers and change for developers is hard. And similarly with solar, because we have a municipal light plant, there might be some other restrictions, but I'm not sure. So I guess I think your point is well taken. We want to make sure that what we do aligns as well as it can with the long range plan and our goals for sustainability, and balance that with, if we make these beautiful zoning bylaws and show these beautiful pictures of what could be, and the developers are like, "No, I don't really want to invest in that," then we haven't really kind of made this area any more walkable or pedestrian friendly. So, thinking about that balance, I think, will be important.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
I don't see any other hands up yet, so let me give folks another minute. If you have other comments about Chris's presentation or things that we should keep in mind, please use the raise hand function so we can call on you. And let that person come in just in case there's a hand up. So while we are waiting, Chris, I think we have consensus on parking, and we'd like you to work in that general area for parking. And so the other thing we told you we would tell you is about the affordable housing. And so we want to come to consensus on, can you go back to that slide if you wouldn't mind? I think we want to tell you I think 15% of units, affordable units, sounds reasonable. I didn't hear Linda, Allen, or Nathan disagree. The question is, should we make that threshold 6 and above units, so 6 or more units, or 8 or more units? And I heard from a couple of the board members 6 or more units. I think I was the only one that said, I would do 8 or more units. So unless anybody says otherwise, Chris, why don't you draft that with 6 or more units at 15%, and let's see what that looks like. Alan and Nathan and Linda, correct me if I'm kind of speaking out of turn here. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
You could always just go with 7.
Yeah. And then I think that'll give us, the other board members kind of something to react to in writing again. And so we'll be able to see if they immediately are like, wow, that's really low, then we'll have an idea about that. Do you need other information from us? I think the other thing that we need to decide is when we're going to do the forum, public forum. And you would be present for that?
Yeah.
Great.
I can
So
do that, sure.
So we might need kind of your availability or you to coordinate with Elizabeth on potential dates.
Sure. Why don't maybe offline, Elizabeth, you and I can catch up. But yeah, generally speaking, I'm flexible. So, I would think at this point, we're going to be, May's going to be here before we know it. So I would think it would probably be June. But I'm certainly flexible. Would
it be at a regular planning board meeting, Elizabeth, or would we need to plan a special forum?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Are you okay if we just leave you and Chris to kind of come up with some dates and then you'll come back to us?
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay. So Chris, this is great. Like I said, I really hope that we see developers, appreciate the work that you've done and the vision that we're trying to share. And so hopefully we're hitting the sweet spot with attractive options for development in this area. And it would really, it seems like, benefit the town. So for anyone listening to the meeting or to the recording, we will plan to have a forum where we really get a lot more public input and you can see kind of the proposed zoning bylaws. That would be one next step. And if we can have a special town meeting in the fall where these bylaws are on the agenda or on the warrant, then we would also have a public hearing closer to that town meeting. So there'd be a couple more places for input, but the public forum at least would give us a chance to make any amendments before we submitted a warrant article for a fall meeting. All right, well, thanks, Chris. It's good to see you again. And we will look forward to kind of being able to hear a larger reaction to all of the hard work you've been doing for, is it really been almost 2 years?
I think we're getting there.
That is something. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chris.
thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Thank you.
All right. So he did, or Elizabeth, you did also post on the current meeting documents zoning bylaws for the Thoreau Depot zoning as of today. So I think he just kind of left in some commentary. I don't know. I didn't have him talk about that, but I think that we'd be hearing more about that or at the next time we hear from him. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So moving on, would you like to start with the A&R?
Sure. Give me 2 seconds. I have to find it. There we go. Oh, well, first I will show you where it is. So this is an A&R. We're in West Concord. This is Main Street. This is before you get to Damon Mill and the Assabet River. Old Stowe Road, as you go across the commuter rail line, 130 Old Stowe Road, and 6 Hillside Avenue. So just to orientate everybody. The lots are in the Residence B zone district, which require 20,000 square feet of area and 125 feet of frontage. And what the plan is showing, this is Old Stowe Road, Hillside Avenue. Property at 130 Old Stowe Road is conveying this parcel A to 6 Hillside Avenue. 130 Old Stowe Road is a conforming lot currently and will remain a conforming lot with over 20,000 square feet and a little over 125 feet of frontage. 6 Hillside Avenue is a legal non-conforming lot. It's has only a little over, I think, 5,000, 5,520, 5,524 square feet and only 50 feet of frontage. So the conveyance of parcel A to 6 Hillside Ave, the lot will have approximately a little over 130 feet of frontage and a little over 8,000 square feet. So any questions on the plan?
No.
So it is my recommendation that the planning board endorse the plan as approval not required because every lot shown on the plan has at least 125 feet of frontage as required by the zoning bylaw on an adequate public way.
Would anyone like to make a motion? I will make a motion as on the screen. I move that the planning board endorse the plan titled Plan of Land 130 Old Stowe Road and 6 Hillside Avenue, Concord, Mass, dated August 4th, 2020, prepared by Bruce Salick and Associates, Inc. for Chester and Marcia Sadlow and Andrew Blackett and Kayla Skyer as approval not required because the plan is not a subdivision, because every lot on the plan has at least 125 feet of frontage as required by the Concord zoning bylaw, and because the on an adequate public way, and authorize the chair, clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan. Is there a second?
I second.
Linda seconds. And quick question, it doesn't, because it's legal non-conforming, it does not need to meet the required square footage.
It does not. It's
Right.
becoming less non-conforming, but
Yep, okay. All right, so we will take a vote. Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
and there's Ms. Ferguson, yes. So that is our A&R. Also on the list tonight is the recommendation to the select board for a 61A notice of intent to sell parcel 1371-4 on Monument Street. Let's hear about that one.
okay. Give me 2 seconds and I will bring that one up as well.
And is this coming to us from, I guess, who brings this to the attention of the planning board? Is there another committee?
No, so this property is currently within a Chapter 61A tax status as open space. And as part of that tax status, if they want to convert the property or take while it's still in chapter, the town is given first right of refusal to purchase the property at the price of the purchase and sale. So this is, oh, I gotta move this over, sorry. So this property is, halfway up Monument Street. This is Buttricks Hill, Balls Hill Road. This is the lot in question. And the purchase and sale agreement is actually for this lot, and then a portion and only this portion about of this lot. So it is this area in red that is being given, the town has been given first right of refusal. The purchase price is $3.5 million. Typically the planning board, looks to, if their responsibility, this will also go to the Natural Resources Commission. They are required to also give a recommendation to the select board. Given the location of this property and its distance from the town center, from transit, and the overall purchase price of the property does not make it ideal for affordable housing. But those are some of the parameters that the board has looked at in the past.
And so right now, the part that you hadn't read and then the part that wraps around, that was all considered open space? Or
It is this parcel
that whole parcel?
that's within chapter.
Okay. So that meant like nobody could build on it?
Correct.
Okay.
While it's in chapter, but because they have a purchase and sale agreement, while it is still in chapter status, that's what triggers the first right of refusal.
Okay. So as soon as they sell it, if the town doesn't buy it, as soon as they sell it, then it's no longer in chapter status and it's a buildable lot.
Correct.
Okay. Or it would need to go to, I guess it doesn't need to go to an A&R because it would be its own lot, even if it was part of a sale of the other parts.
Correct. Well, more than likely though. Let me see. Here it is. So this is the letter from the attorney, and then part of this is the exhibit plan that shows. So this is the portion that is not included in the sale,
Mhm.
and this is the portion that's included in the sale. It also includes those two other existing lots.
Mhm. And is it likely that a subdivision would go there?
Given the size of these three lots combined and the frontage, I don't think it would be a subdivision. I think they would be A&R lots between
Okay.
5 and 6 lots.
Okay. That is the whole newly created part that's for sale. Yeah.
This
Yep. Could
whole
be.
part is being sold.
Yep. And that could be 5 or 6 lots. Okay. Alan, Linda, and Nathan, what questions do you have?
I mean, I don't have any questions. I think we know where this one is going to go. $3.5 million is for where it is too much to really recommend anything for it. It's unfortunate. It's a nice. I thought it was the lot in my mind that I looked on Google Maps, and it is. It's currently a nice. I think it's like a horse farm meadow type thing. So be unfortunate to see that get developed, but yeah, $3.5 million too much.
Yeah. Thing just because we don't want it developed as much as that would be nice. Alan, Linda?
I have no recommendation that the town take any action in terms of any beneficial use other than to increase the tax base in town.
And you have the perspective of finance committee. You probably have an understanding about what kinds of funds are available to purchase property for, different reasons. And I don't know if this would have to be purchased with our affordable housing funds, or if it would, so you probably have a good perspective at
Well,
least on.
if it abutted any other open space areas, that would provide recreational use, that certainly should be considered, but it's really in the midst of a area that's, as far as I know, developed for residential use with large lots and large houses on it. So it seems if Concord is going to have large lots and large houses, this is a very suitable area for that purpose. And that, I think there's probably other areas that are more suitable for open space and recreation and more suitable areas for affordable housing that the town could purchase for $3.5 billion. So I think that this makes, this, I don't see that intervening and recommending that the town acquire this property would be optimal. So.
Okay, thank you.
I agree. I don't think the town should take any action on this.
Okay, I agree too. Do we need to take an official vote, Elizabeth? The consensus is that we would not recommend. But.
Yes, the board should take a formal vote to not recommend the town exercise its first right of refusal. Given the remoteness of the property from village centers and its location in an area of town that's developed with large lots, it's not an ideal location for affordable housing, given the purchase price, and that it is also, it's not adjacent to any other permanently protected open space to expand any protected open space.
Thank you for capturing that. So if you agree that our recommendation will be to not purchase the land, say yes. Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
and this is Ms. Ferguson. Yes, recommend not purchasing the land. That wasn't confusing at all.
Can someone actually move that, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Start over. Uh, would someone like to move to make that negative recommendation officially?
I will try and move it. I move that the planning board recommend to the select board that the select board not exercise its right of first refusal and option to purchase the assessor's parcel 1371-4 situated on Monument Street in Concord
That's
for
perfect.
use by the town.
That's perfect.
I second. This is Kristen. Do we need to take a vote again? Nancy, would you feel more comfortable if we did?
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson, yes. All right, thank you, Nancy, for keeping us in line. All right, moving right along. You will be glad you are attending tonight because we do need to pick which warrant articles we're going to present at, oh, no, you're not ready for that?
And I have something even better. I have 4 of the public hearing presentations to run through very quickly.
Perfect. But I want people to look at them and imagine themselves presenting.
Okay. So give me 1 second. Okay, we will start with Article 35, which is the tree preservation bylaw. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So first part and the notes, speaker notes down here are are from just the warrant article explanation. And it goes through and it tells the amendment objectives. And these are based on the reviewing agent's recommendations, and the speaker notes provide the reasons why these 3 amendments are being made, and that's it. Pretty simple. Okay. And next one is Article 36. Can everybody see that one? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So the Floodplain Conservancy District bylaw amendment. So the reasons for the amendment, state model floodplain bylaw, national flood insurance program, and property owners being able to get property insurance. And then the additional town amendment formalizing the 1.5 to 1 compensatory storage and the waiver provision. And just goes through and talks about the waiver provision and what that means, and then the benefits of the amendment. Town stays in the NFIP program, flood insurance, and the speaker notes down here talk about the board's reasoning as far as the margin of error in surveying and construction when it deals with the 1.5 to 1 compensatory storage and a proactive step towards climate change. And that's it. Okay, and then we go to number 37, which is the parking for I need to change that. Should be seasonal outdoor seating. I have to change that. The amendment objectives eliminate the 1 space per 3 seats for seasonal outdoor seating. The reasons and the speaker notes are down here from the explanation in the warrant, promote economic recovery, vibrant village centers, and flexibility for restaurant owners. And then thought it would be important to state that what the amendment does not change, doesn't change the requirement for this parking for indoor seating or employees, doesn't change ADA and fire code requirements, Board of Health and Food Code requirements, and public safety requirements, which would be, you can't place tables and chairs out on the sidewalk and make pedestrians have to go into the street. And
I think it might be good to add to that one, you know, how many properties this is going to affect. How many restaurants?
Yeah, I probably would have that in the speaker notes.
Okay.
As you know. So I'll run through that.
So people understand that kind of the scale of what this would affect. And then also that, I don't know, I didn't read the speaker notes yet, but so you reference the state of emergency, and I think just saying that this would go beyond the state of emergency, this would make it a kind of a permanent feature, that it wouldn't expire when the state of emergency expires. And I think that's in the notes, but just, I think that's important to convey.
Okay, so maybe just that you can say, you know, permanently eliminates the required.
Yeah, and I guess I want to be a little careful with the word permanent, because then people will kind of freak out. But like, yeah,
Normally.
formally, I think is better. Thank you.
Okay. And that's it. And then the last one is Article 38.
Are we only presenting 4 so far? I can't remember. We're
5.
Five.
And
Okay.
the last one I still have to work on is the earth removal.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right. So I couldn't remember if it was 5 or 6. So 5 total, and this is the 4th one you've already done. Thank you very much.
I took last year's and just updated it. So we have, what the bylaw amendment is: allow 2-family dwellings by special permit in the Residence C zone district. Also adding the board may also allow a reduction in the required parking. Again, amendment objectives. And so this was from last year's. Oh, I gotta move the page number. So that was from last year's slide. This goes into the numbers. This is all last year's slide. For this one, I added this parking, 2 spaces required for each unit, but can be reduced.
That can be reduced by special permit?
So all of this is by special permit.
Oh, but can be reduced as part of this special permit process. Okay.
Yes. And then, so this again is just last year's slides and aligns with the goals, and that's it.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention, but I want to get the name right. Elizabeth, we met with the Concord Business Partnership last week. So the Concord Business Partnership invited the planning board to discuss the warrant articles that were going to go on the warrant this year. And so they listened to kind of everything and had some good feedback, but the one they asked the most questions about was the 2-family. And in particular, why this was going to be by right.
No, why it's by
no, thank you. Thank you. By why we are, proposing it by special permit as opposed to by right. And I know we as the planning board for the past year, and even, but when we were going to present it last year, discussed that in great detail. So I just want to make sure that we're prepared to communicate the reasoning we did with the business partnership, but also kind of with the public about that. So does anyone have questions? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
So, I mean, these are just this is just the first drafts. And then I do think the two-family presentation, there should be a slide added why we're proposing it to be a special permit and not by right. I think that should be added. But generally what happens at this point is board members take on which presentation they want to make. This draft presentation goes out to them for them to think about and add to the speaker notes or work with me on adding additional information or additional slides. And then the schedule would be, as far as the calendar, you have tonight's meeting, you have a meeting on, your next meeting is May 4th. You would review the presentations again, and then they would need to be finalized. Whoever takes on a presentation, you can make additional edits, but I think they are required to be submitted towards the end of that week or Monday the 10th at the latest for your public hearing on May 13th.
Okay, excellent. So we've got 5 articles. The as she mentioned, the last one that's not shown here today is the earth removal.
Which I think Haley has already said that she would take on that presentation.
Or if she hasn't, I think we've already said that she would. So she's not here to object. Would anyone like to take on any of the ones for tonight? And basically, Linda, what we do is at the public hearing on May 13th, we do present these articles kind of like a preview so that that we can see kind of the questions that are there. And sometimes there aren't any questions or very few questions. It's very non-controversial. And the town moderator says, you know what, that one's probably going to go on the consent calendar. And then you don't have to present again at the town meeting because that would be on the consent calendar unless it was removed. So, Alan, I really feel like if you want to pick one, you should.
I would love to do the tree preservation.
Okay. I appreciate that. And then Nathan, did you do two-family last year or Burton?
Yeah, I was on deck for a 2-family last year. I even did it at the
Yeah.
public hearing, and then we didn't put it through. So I'm happy to do that one again.
Okay.
Or, we kind of joked about me doing the seasonal outdoor dining since I kind of pushed to get that one to continue on. So I'm happy to do either one.
Okay.
Or Linda, if there's one of the two of those that that you want to do.
And we've also got the other 3 members as well. But Linda, if there is one that you're like, I'd love to dabble in that one. It looks harmless. Although I did say that about the one and that I was like, that one's definitely going to the consent calendar and it didn't. And I was like, I forget what it was. It was, and then I actually did present at town meeting and it was totally non-controversial.
Yeah.
I don't remember. what that one
Figured I'd get a pass as a newbie, but if you need me, I'll do one. So,
Okay.
but I'm good. I'm good.
So Linda, we'll put you on backup since it's your first year. And then, so, all right. Okay. All right.
I'll be
So,
the understudy.
yeah. All right. So, I'm happy to do the seasonal out. Oh, I was going to do seasonal outdoor dining. And then Bert or Nathan, you and Burton can fight over 2-family maybe.
I'll take the 2-family one. I mean, like I said,
Okay.
I was ready to go with it last year, so it's fine to do it this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one we're going to get the most questions about, which I know you've been preparing for a year, so I feel like you're super ready. So Haley, earth removal, Nathan, 2-family, Kristen, seasonal outdoor dining, Alan.
You can give Burton floodplain.
Oh, perfect. That's got to go to the consent calendar.
And just so we're aligned, in your conversation with what did you say was the Concord Business
Partnership.
Our reason for it being by special permit rather than by right is what I remember it being a year ago was basically that we wanted this to be sort of an initial, testing out of this and just see how much interest there even really was in it. And is that sort of what our response still is, or have we?
Well, that and
further?
that and thinking that if residents of the town were a little concerned about two
Exactly.
families going in, that we'd say, well, we've got the special permit process where we can have input on the design or the look and things like that. And so they might feel more confident voting for it. But Elizabeth, this year, will this only need a majority, or just it's not applicable to this one?
No, I don't think, because I think the threshold for the housing choice is 3 or more units.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
But
this
I
one
think
would still
we
need
can-
2/3.
Yeah, so Nathan, I think, as far as the, reasons for it being special permit is the lots in Resident C district are, generally smaller. So, the potential impact on, neighborhood character, abutters, there's the potential for, greater impact, and the special permit process allows for notification to abutters and, special permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals to be able to look at those issues and concerns.
Yep. Yeah, that is very similar to what.
Kristen, that
we
was
discussed.
one. And then the other reason, just residents see, as far as the special permit, I mean, I'm kind of the opinion that while it is a fact of truth that for zoning bylaws, the planning board has done this for decades. You start small and see how it works, and then you can expand from there. I'll just have to figure out how to make that sound better than just make it sound reasonable, that it's to start in a smaller area and see what the I can't think of the words right now.
So yeah, and so we wanted to be able to kind of relax the restriction after we introduced it, rather than tighten the restriction, rather than have it by right, have a bunch of stuff happen and then us kind of pull in the reins. So we'll work on that language that will resonate, will make sense to people.
Yeah, and that's similar to what we said, because I remember a lot of questions that we got
Right.
last time was why only residents C.
Yep.
And that was also part of that reasoning, is that we're starting in sort of a small scale and just see what kind of feedback we get, and then expand out as needed or as wanted.
Excellent. Well, we Elizabeth, anything else about town meeting or the articles?
No, so I'll send these presentations to everybody, and then Nathan, if you want, you and I can just go back and forth on adding those additional slides and reasons. I think you're right. I can't even remember now, but the reasons why just residency and then the reasons why special permit, I think would be the two things that Kristen and I heard at the Concord Business Partnership that should be added.
Yep.
Well, great. Thanks. I think that will be exciting for you. All right. We've got draft meeting minutes to review, and then liaison reports, and then we will open it up to public comment. So the meeting minutes are from March 23rd, 2021. Did anyone find anything that should be corrected? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as written.
Second the motion?
I'm sorry, Linda, are you making the motion?
No, I seconded it.
Oh, all right. Well, I made the motion to adopt the minutes as written. Linda seconded. Mr. Saya? I think you said yes. Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Bossett? I heard you,
Yes.
Ellen. And this Ms. Ferguson, yes. So we will adopt the meeting minutes of March 23rd, 2021 as written. Thank you very much. Any liaison reports or staff updates?
Staff updates. No, I can tell you on your May 4th agenda will be the Concord Children's Center site plan application. And I can't think of any other projects that are coming down the pike yet.
Did the 48Y or Fitchburg Turnpike ever come back?
No, haven't heard a word.
Okay. Okay. Otherwise, it's pretty slow in your office. I mean, for applications, I
No.
should say.
It's definitely.
I meant for applications.
Oh, you know what? For particular applications, yes, but it's.
Oh, I know it's never slow. We sign you up for all kinds of things.
But yeah, the Board of Appeals is happy. They only have one application for their meeting next month. I can't ever remember that, so
Wow.
I don't know, but I'll take it.
Okay. I would open it up for public comment. If you have a comment, please use the raise hand function and we will ask you to unmute yourself. I am not seeing any hands up, but I'll give everybody another minute. Any other parting thoughts from the board? All right, still not seeing any other hands up. So we are gonna meet again on May 4th and then May 13th is a public hearing. Oh, I actually see a hand up. How nice it is to see somebody. Could we unmute Claire Gordon so she could speak, please? You're still muted.
Okay,
Gotcha.
now, okay, Claire Gordon, 100 Newbury Court. I'm sorry, I don't see a raise hand function on this screen today, but anyway, my comment is, I think it's anyway, it's on the 2-family, whatever number article that is. I think it's really important that there be a map of where this residency is in town. I mean, I think that's really important for people to understand what part of town we're talking about. And if we could get that into materials early, I think that would really help people understand what you're proposing.
Great, thank you.
That's a great point. Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Okay. You got in just under the wire. Well, I see no other hands, so I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and we will adjourn this meeting at 8:46. And nope. How about now?
Great, thank you.
All
Have a good
right.
night, everyone.
Good night.